All right, well, welcome everybody. We're going to be talking today about business writing, and this class in particular is Business 22, but I also sometimes use these recordings for other classes in business communications because the topic on business writing is pretty much the same. And what I want to say about business writing is it is different than writing an essay or anything that you've learned in English, apart from things, of course, like grammar, sentence structure, sentence types, things like that. All that's still relevant. But most of the students that take my class have also required to take English 1A, or maybe not this particular class, but most of them do. And in that class, they've been taught English composition, which is writing essays, and that's wonderful and great. And usually a professor that has you write an essay says it needs to be 6 pages long. And so what a student often does is they just cram as much information as they can to fill those 6 pages up, as eloquently as they can. And of course, in English, we're writing novels. Some of the students want to become writers or whatever they might do, and so they're using flowery language, and they're using descriptive language, and all those things that make an essay more readable and more exciting to read. Well, in business writing, it's all about brevity. It's all about economics. Busy business people don't have time to read your flowery essay. They want to just get to the facts and the information quickly and efficiently so they can get the job done. So it's really about being as clear, simple, plain as you possibly can be in your writing. And it's also it's also very important how your document looks, because we all know when you open up an essay that somebody's written, it is paragraphs and paragraphs and walls of text that you have to read through. Well, in business writing, it should not be walls of text. It should be little short chunks of information that are designed and built out in such a way that are very appealing to your eye, and they draw your eye to important things and allow you to really scan a document versus actually having to read it in detail. This morning I was reading a book. I read books every day, and I'm reading a book, and I was just noting how it was laid out, the page, and they had a little quote right in the middle of the page so that the text kind of wrapped around the quote, but it was all one paragraph. And I was looking at it, and it was pleasant to read, but I'm reading a book because I know that it's filled with text, and I'm preparing myself to read through those paragraphs. Well, when somebody gets a letter or an email or a memo from you, they don't want to have to do a lot of reading. They just want to get to the message that you're trying to communicate. And that you can make that super easy for them by outlining and organizing your documents to look appealing and to be easy to read. And that's really the goal of business writing. And again, economical. Some people like to get wordy and they like to stretch it all out. But just to be honest, every assignment in this class shouldn't be more than a page at the most, maybe even a half page. The only thing that will go beyond that is when you're doing a report, and that would be multiple pages. But a letter, any letter you write in this class on any of the assignments I give you, they should be page or less. If they're over a page, then you've added too much content. There's no reason to have it all there. So that's what we'll kind of be talking about today. So what thought I would start with is what I call the do's and don'ts of business writing. And by the way, it happens to be your discussion post. So in some ways, I'm kind of doing your final discussion post. So if you've done your discussion post already, discussion post number 2, you're supposed to make an initial list of the do's and don'ts. And then you're supposed to read and review 2 other students' lists. And then you're supposed to refine yours and then submit your final list, right? That's the assignment. And by the way, if you do it all on the same day, I mark you down, because really it should be something that you're doing over the 4 or 5 weeks. And so I'm going to really be giving you your final list in this presentation. So you're certainly welcome to submit what I write down here as your final lists. But make sure you still make an initial list and that you have comments on other students. And I believe probably all of you on this Zoom call have already done that. So this could be your final list that you could submit anytime after you've viewed and commented on other students' lists. But basically, business writing is broken into 2 parts. The first part is how it reads. Obviously, it needs to be professional. It needs to be grammatically correct. It needs to have the right tone. needs to be economical, all those things. But it also 50% how it looks. And again, that comes back to what we call design elements for readability. And your book in chapter 4 gives you some design, using document design to improve readability. That's the title of the section that I'm driving your attention to. And in that, it tells you to use, short single space paragraphs, bullet lists, headings, bold text, etc. So you're trying to create your page to not just be a wall of text, but you're trying to create your page to be something that the eye can scan right down very quickly and get the gist of the message without having to sit down and remove all distractions and read it intently. You want to be able to scan it because, again, a busy business person's on the phone, they just answered an email, they're texting home, they're doing 10 things at once, and then you throw a document in front of them. They want to be able to just zip through it quickly. And that's what you're that's your goal in your business writing, is to make it something people aren't afraid to get. Oh no, Dan wrote another letter. Goodness, what's this going to be? Rather than, wow, I'm so glad it's Dan that wrote that letter or whatever, or that report. So that's kind of the goal. So I'm going to do the do's and don'ts of how it looked or how it reads, and then I'm going to do the do's and don'ts of how it looks. Okay. And as I do this, I'll explain a little bit what each thing means if I need to as we go through. So first do on how it reads is, I got to get this right command here. Oh no. I didn't just do that. All right, well, now you're going to get the whole thing at once. Sorry, I'm going to close this. It didn't work the way I wanted it to. Bummer. All right, hold on. I got to reopen it now. Jeepers, I'm sorry. I had it all figured out and then I didn't. So. All right, so here we go. I'm going to just share my screen again. Actually, what I think I'm going to do, if you guys don't mind, is I'm going to pause again. All right, let me share my screen. Here we go. All right, so now you see it again. So again, we're going to talk first on how it reads. So the first thing is, why isn't this working? Maybe I'm not on it. Hold on. There we go. All right, the first thing is that your document should have a conversational tone about it. And what that means is you're not using too formal or too informal of language. You kind of use everyday language in your document. So again, sometimes people feel like, oh, it's a business document, so it's got to sound really professional and official. And so they start using all this jargon, all these really big words, all this, please be advised, and just all this stuff that just makes it sound real authoritative. And that's not positive in a business environment, again, because it makes it difficult for people to read. You just want to keep it simple. So conversational tone is really pretty much how you would normally talk to somebody, is kind of the tone in which you should write your business document. You don't have to say, please be advised, just say, please be aware, or please take note, just things that make it sound very normal conversational tone. And that's very important when it comes to business writing. So that means not too formal and not too informal. And in the PowerPoint on this chapter, I believe I show you an example of each, but too informal would be, things like, hey dudes, or hey guys. Some people get just a little bit too informal, maybe even using emojis or shorthand in their letter or their text or their email. And that's just too informal. It's not professional, but you can be professional and at the same time be conversational. So that's kind of the goal. Also, not too formal, as I mentioned. Please be advised, or that's the one that keeps coming to mind. But our telephone conversation, our telephone interaction, things like telephonic interaction, stuff like that. Just say the telephone, whatever, or our phone call. So we got to be careful just not to sound too informal. And a great way to test this, by the way, is just have somebody in your family read your document. And if to them they're going, what does that mean? Then you've lost probably in the majority of your audience. So do it that way. Second thing you want to do is your tone should be very positive. And if you remember during, I don't know if you guys, if I had you guys do the sentence rewrite assignment in this class or not, but in your book, it goes through some sentence rewrites. And basically, the one thing that business documents or business writing should be is positive. You don't focus on what you can't do. You know, your request has been denied, you know, or whatever. You can say we can't fulfill your request. However, we're going to make it positive. We're going to redirect. We can offer you a discount, or we can offer you a different product, or whatever. You know, your order was we were unable to ship your order, you know, and then we redirect. So it's always focusing on the positive. One of the examples that the sentence rewrites gives, I don't know, again, I don't know if that's in this class or not. I get confused. I teach a lot of sections of this, but it's, you know, there's a statement that says, you know, the construction on your project is at a standstill. The soil is wet and footings cannot be poured, and it's just all negative, right? It's everything that we can't do. We can't do it now. And so all you do is you take that approach and you make it positive. You say, hey, construction will start soon, once the soil is dry, right? So I'm still telling you the same thing. I'm just keeping it positive looking rather than negative looking. We are unable at this time to do anything on your project. That's all negative, right? Instead, say, we'll get started soon once the soil is dry. And that's the answer. So just try and keep it positive. Be aware, be afraid, not be afraid, but steer away from negative statements. And your book gives you a list of words not to use, you know, failure, denial, you know, rejection. Those kind of words just come across harsh and come across negative. You should try and make it as positive as you can. Whatever, even if it's bad news, you try and word it in such a way that focuses on the positive aspects of the bad news. So that's the second thing. So the tone should be conversational and positive. Thirdly, your tone and your message should be very clear and plain. Again, just use everyday simple language, just like you would ask your child, or you're talking to your child or talking to another person, just that conversational style. And it's very clear and plain and simple. You don't need to be flowery. You don't need to try and impress anybody by using big words and long, flowery paragraphs and descriptive statements. Not unnecessary. Just clearly say what you want, clearly say what you're asking, clearly communicate what you need, what they need to know. That's the idea. And again, that when you do that, it gets rid of all that length as you're trying to describe things. Next, it should be you-centered. And this means that you should always have your audience in mind when you write. In other words, it's not about me and my company and what I can do as the writer. It's about what we're going to do for you. It's about how this benefits you. So, you know, I could say, you know, we have a strict company policy that does not allow you to take back your merchandise for cash returns, but we can give you store credit. You know, that's coming across about, it's all about me, right? It's all about what our company will or will not allow. Well, you can turn that around and say, hey, for your benefit, we're going to offer you a cash store credit for your return merchandise. This way we can continue to offer you name brands at discount prices. You know, so it's all about the you, and it's positive, even though it's negative. So that's very important. Your book gets into that quite a bit. So make sure you understand the you-centered, and I'll be looking for that as I read your papers. That you're focused on the benefit of your reader. And even the whole idea of making your document appealing is all about the reader. It's not about you. It's about them getting the message that they need to get. And again, it should be brief and short. Your book calls it economical. We have a lot of unnecessary words, a lot of unnecessary phrases, a lot of unnecessary statements. We have these long lead-ins like, I am emailing you today to remind you of, well, why do you need to say I'm emailing you today? It's obvious that you're emailing me today. I'm getting the email, right? So get rid of those long lead-ins that lead into paragraphs. Just say, I'm emailing you today, or not even that. Just say, you know, the purpose. So now I'm getting off track. But my point is, you don't need those long lead-ins. I forgot what I said a minute ago. And then, so again, long, unnecessary. So when I took a business communications class for my master or bachelor's degree, they gave us a paragraph of information, a text. It was a informational paragraph that was going on and on, very flowery, very cluttery, very unnecessary. And the teacher said, I want you to edit that down to the absolute necessary statements that are in this document. And we were able to get it down to 2 sentences, because all the rest was just unnecessary words. And so it's really pretty fascinating when you start really editing and saying, is that necessary? Is that necessary? And pretty soon you could take a 50-word sentence and make it 10. And now you're down to the heart of the matter and what needs to be said. So that's kind of the idea. If you, again, all my assignments shouldn't be more than a page in this class, except the report at the end. All the rest should be a page or less. And if you went over a page, you're being way too wordy and way too descriptive. Keep it simple, keep it short. And then you should change up your sentence types. So one thing that you'll learn in the book is that short, simple sentences are with, one independent clause or one independent statement. It stands alone. It's a complete sentence. They're very short. You can pretty much get by with, 5 or 6 or 8 words in a single sentence. That's a short, simple sentence. Business writing thrives on those because they're clear and they're easy to understand and they're very easy to comprehend. But it makes your document a little choppy if it's all these 10, 6, 10, 8-word sentences. So use things like compound sentences or compound complex sentences. Compound sentences where you just add a comma and the word and or but or because, and then you add a second part. As long as they're related, the sentence is complete. And those compounds make it a little bit easier to read, but not having to be flowery. The negative I see here is that students, they have this fetish with commas, and they just have a sentence and a comma and a sentence and another comma and another part of the sentence and another comma and another comma and another sentence. And they got this sentence that could be 2 really easy, simple, complete sentences, and they make it a full paragraph if that's one sentence. So again, you got to change it up, but don't have these lengthy sentences. And that's what I'm going to mention next. Your sentences should be about 20 words long on average. That's a good length. So that's the goal. So use simple sentences, compound sentences, complex sentences, and then complex compound sentences. They're all a little bit different, but they allow you to have a little bit more length to your sentence without corrupting your grammar or your punctuation, things like that. So you can look those up. They're in your book as well. And just mix it up a little bit is my purpose. But the bigger picture here is just, I shouldn't have a sentence that is 200 words long or 100 words long or even 50. It should be, if you're reading it, this is my rule of thumb. If you're reading it and you're having to go back and start over because you're lost, that means your sentence is clunky and too long. Better yet, have somebody else read it. And if they have to stop in the middle of the sentence and go back and begin reading it again, it's either too long and it's certainly clunky. So you need to maybe take that and make it 2 simple sentences. That's the way to overcome it. So, and then of course you want to use proper grammar, punctuation, full complete sentences, etc. Be careful of not falling into the trap of making your document similar to you would make a text message, because a lot of people get used to those shorthands and they start doing that. And that's what I mean by too informal. If you're doing things like LOL and IKN, I don't know, things like that in your document, then now you went too informal. You want to make sure you spell that out. So, and then proper grammar, obviously sentence structure. And I think there's a section in your book where you're dealing with a little bit of grammar in each chapter, but nonetheless, make sure that you take what you learned in English 1A and then grammar and that you apply it here. I'm not a grammar teacher. I'm not looking for this, but if it jumps out at me, I'll note it and you'll lose some points for it. So most everybody does fine because I'm not looking at it in detail for grammar and for punctuation. But again, if something's glaringly off, or if I read a sentence and I'm like, it doesn't make any sense to me, then I'll start marking you down on the grammar piece. And then again, use complete sentences, not shorthand. That's kind of the same thing. Don't do the texting stuff. And then you want to use parallel structure. So you can look this up in your book, but basically if you have, the example that the book gives is, Mary began using the computer and to learn her coworkers' names. That was a sentence example. So she began using the computer and to learn her coworkers' names. Well, it's not parallel. It would flow much more smoothly to say Mary began using the computer and learning her coworkers' names, right? So I went from using and learning. I went from using to learn, from using and learning, and now it became parallel in its structure. Another example that I can use is there was Alma Cervantes the director of our Utah branch will now be supervising the mountain region. And then the next part of the sentence says, the Colorado branch, which is directed by Mary Smith, will now supervise the Eastern Division. Well, the two parts of the sentence aren't parallel because the first one starts with name, then branch, then the division, where the next one started with division, then name, and then branch. So just make them the same. Name, branch, division, name, branch, division. Now the two sentences or the sentences parallel and it flows. That's what we mean by parallel. And you can look that up in your book. There should be a section on that. And I don't know which chapter it was in, but it was one of the earlier chapters. So be aware of that, but also be aware of run-on sentences, comma splices, incomplete sentences, all that kind of stuff. Again, I'm not looking for this, but if it jumps out at me, I will note it and you'll lose points. So, all right, so that's pretty much how it reads. And this is just common sense stuff that your book talks about and what I'll be looking for in your documents. Now, and then last one is proper structure, intro, body, conclusion. Again, this is very important. You don't want to be talking about in paragraph one thing, and then talking about a different thing in paragraph 2, and then back to the same thing you were talking about in paragraph 1 that has nothing to do with paragraph 2. You want to group all your information together. You want to chunk it together. You want it to be organized. Just like you would sit down and write an essay, you'd come up with some kind of an intro or a greeting at the beginning. You come up with the body of your message, and then you come up with some kind of a concluding statement. You really should keep that in mind in anything you write, whether it be an email, a letter, a memo. There should be some kind of introductory statement. There should be a body that has the message that you want to communicate. And then there should be some kind of a concluding statement or a call to action at the end. And so structure is very important. And some of the assignments that you're going to be doing, you're going to have to put like ideas together to make it very organized. And this, by the way, is where headings come in, very helpful, because if you start grouping things together, you can put it all under a heading. And now that helps you to kind of know where that should go. And it also helps your reader know that's what we're talking about in this paragraph versus, again, paragraph 1, you're talking about topic A. Paragraph B, you're talking about topic B. Paragraph 3, you're talking about C and A, and then B a little bit. And why not just group them all together? It makes it easier for your reader. This is what we call chunking. You're chunking the information into bites, and each bite is its own topic. And that's the idea of structure. And I think there might be one more now. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Grouping like ideas together. That's chunking. So, all right. So now the first in the how it looks. This is very important. And I'll be grading you 50% of your grade is based on this. So you should always use single-spaced paragraphs in business writing, never double-spaced, single-spaced. And by the way, when you do your document, when you start typing, select all of your text, go to your paragraph feature, whether it be in Google Docs or in Word, and see what your line spacing is. It should be single-spaced, and also there should be no spaces before or after the paragraph. So sometimes there's line spaces before or after, and that makes your paragraph look double spaced. So make sure it's truly single spaced. Those should both be 0, which is lines before or after a paragraph, and then you should be single spaced, that setting on your word processing software. So single spaced paragraphs, never double spaced, never. It's not supposed to look like an essay. It's supposed to look like a business document. Short, single-spaced paragraphs are little chunks of information as you're going down the page. That's what you want. Not a big wall of text, and not a double-spaced for sure. So that's the first how it looks thing you need to do. Secondly is short paragraphs separated by a space. Never all one paragraph. So I don't care if your document is a 5-line paragraph, make it 2 sentences, make it 2 small paragraphs that are 2.5 sentences each. That makes it easy for the eye to read it versus 1. So again, short paragraph separated by a space, and then another short paragraph separated by a space, and another short paragraph separated by space. That allows you to chunk the information and for your reader to go boom, 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 and read it very quickly versus having to read it all. And then the maximum size of your paragraph, according to your book, the general guideline is 8 lines. So if you have a long document, like say a full 2.5 pages, your largest paragraph should be no longer than 8 lines. And what I mean by 8 lines is if you look at our sheet right here, each line of text is 1 line. So conversational tone, if I start there, 1, positive 2, clear 3, you 4, brief 5, change 6, simple 7, use 8. So that's the maximum length of your paragraphs, visually speaking. And by the way, again, if it's a short document, say your whole document is only 8 lines, then make it 2 or 3 shorter paragraphs with the information relevant to each paragraph in it. And that is going to make it much easier for your reader to read it and to follow it. So that's the idea. So never all one paragraph. Also, no indents. Now, there's a temptation for students for some reason to go, well, on that first line, I tab over and then I start my text on the first line. You guys learned that maybe in English, not in business writing. No tab overs, no indents. Just start left justified on your document, right? The very first space should be your very first letter, and then move over. Now, the right side of your document should be jagged, kind of like if you're looking at the screen right now, and I'll show you some samples of this later, but it's jagged on the right, but the left of each paragraph is justified. It's all straight and even, right? And that's how you want your document to ultimately look. Left justified, all the way ragged on the right, but no indents. Don't tab over the first line. Then proper formatting, and this is very important, especially when it comes to this class. If I tell you to do a letter, it should be formatted like a letter. If I tell you to do an email, it should be formatted like an email. If I tell you to do a memo, it's got to be formatted like a memo. And right off the bat, what I do in this class and all my classes now is if it's not formatted properly, I give you a 0 and I say, please reformat your document appropriately. And then that's all I do. I don't give you any other feedback. So I'll send you back to take your document, go find out how to format it like a letter. By the way, I give you a lot of samples throughout the class. So when you get to the assignment, there should be a sample in there that shows you what a memo looks like or shows you what a letter should look like. But there's also an appendix in your book, and there's also many samples throughout your book as to what a memo and a letter and an email should look like. So make sure that you format it properly. And so what I mean by formatted is, again, it should be like a letter, like an email, like a memo, and that it also should have the proper margins, the correct kind of title or top section of the letter or memo, and then it should also have some kind of signature block or signature at the bottom, and they're all different for all 3 types of documents. So you need to know what those differences are, and when you create your document, you make it appropriate to the document that you're sending. So, and you can look in the appendix for that and throughout the book. So look for an example of a letter, look for an example of a memo, look for an example of an email. And the email, I'll just say this, all you really need in an email is the subject line, because the subject line is extremely critical in an email. That's how people determine whether they even want to read your email, because that's what they usually see in their email program. And that a business email should always include a full signature block. What that means is my name, my title, the company I work for, my phone number with extension, my email address. That's a full signature block. So when you work for a business, typically they set it up in your email program to include your signature block whenever you generate a new email. Well, you should have that signature block with all that information in it on all your business emails. So just keep that in mind. That's really all the email needs, other than the subject line at the top. I don't require you to create the entire title block of an email, because that's done automatically for you when you generate an email in Outlook or wherever you do it. So proper formatting. Next, font size. Your font should be roughly between 10 and 12, and that's it. You shouldn't be typing 14 font on a business letter or document. You should not be typing 9 font because they're too small or it's too big. It should be 10 to 12, roughly. That's a good size. So not too large or not too small. So be aware of that. Secondly, and if for some reason you're at a 10 font, the smallest, and you're rolling over into 2 pages, then you need to edit it down. That's all there is to it. Make it shorter so that it fits on 1 page. And then also use headings. Now, you may think, wait a minute, a letter, do I use headings on a letter? Yes. In business, to really make yourself stand out, I mean, if you use headings, it just makes it so much easier for your audience to know what follows the heading, right? And so I can read the headings right off the bat and get a good gist of what the letter's about if I've done a good job. Now, sometimes your headings are just simple things like intro body and conclusion. Not that you'd use those, but it could be executive summary. It could be main report, things like that. That helps. That's called a informational heading, or you could make them talking headings where you actually encapsulate in a few words what's in the paragraph that follows. That's very beneficial to your audience because, again, it makes your document more scannable because they can just read the headings and now they know a little bit more about what the letter's about. So that's very valuable. And don't be afraid to use headings. I highly, highly encourage that you use them in any document you create, even a short email. A heading is helpful. And so do that. Secondly, along with that is use bullet lists and numbered lists. Now, bullet lists and numbered lists take a paragraph that's difficult to read, especially if it's a natural list inside the paragraph. So difficult to read. You're like reading all the items, I need you to do these 8 things for me. And you put it in a paragraph. The person's like, why not just make it a list? 8 bullet points. Here they are. And it makes it easy for the person to scan right down the list and what they all are. Use bullet lists as much as you possibly can for any kind of lists or statements or projects or things that need to be done. If there's anything like that at all, put it in a bullet list. Take a paragraph of information. You have 8 things in the sentence that you're trying to communicate. Make it a list. It makes it so much more easier for your audience to read it and to zip their eyes right down it. And you'll see that in some of the assignments I'll show you in a minute, how much more beneficial that is rather than having a paragraph. And then you definitely want to use bold text, italicized text, underlined text, and yes, even all caps at times in your document, throughout your document. So I like to say, you have a paragraph of text. Every paragraph of text should have some kind of design element in it that highlights the key phrase or the keywords or especially dates, times, numbers, etc. Those should all be bold. So that way, when I'm reading a document, I'm not just seeing a light paragraph of text. I'm seeing a paragraph of text, but then right in the middle is something bolded that makes my eye go to that and I catch it. And now it's the main purpose or main statement or purpose of that paragraph. I know what it's about by just reading that bold text, and that helps me to scan it much more quickly. And that's the idea. So use these design elements to grab the eye of your reader as they're scanning your document. And I would say use them liberally. You might say, well, I'm not used to seeing that too often. Trust me, it's going to make you stand out as a communicator in your business play. People are going to go, wow, I was able to, I like getting stuff from Irene. I like getting stuff from Dan. I like getting stuff from Miriam. I like getting stuff from Linda because they make it easy for me to read their stuff. It's so scannable. I can just swoosh right through it. And it takes me half the time to read their stuff as it does anybody else the same length. And then again, you should fit it on one page. Don't make it on multiple pages unless, this is my rule of thumb, you can use 40% of the next page. I would say 20 to 40% of the next page. Don't make it 2 pages. So if you find yourself doing a letter and then it rolls over into the second page, a couple of sentences, and then your name and all that, make it 1 page. It's not worth it to make it 2. Edit it down to get it on 1 page. That's my recommendation. But if it goes into, 30% of the next page, 40% of the next page, certainly 50% of the next page, then make it 2. You might even want to spread it out and use more design elements to help them to scan it easier. But 2 pages is frustrating. 1 page is usually good, especially memos. Memos, I know they can be multiple pages, but if you are making a memo to all employees that's probably going to be stapled on a bulletin board somewhere around the company, make it 1 page. They don't want to staple up 3 pages, right? They want to staple up 1 page. That way everybody sees it. If it's 3 pages, they're not going to even read it. So keep it short as the key. And then use graphics, tables for data, make your document visually appealing. There's nothing wrong in business writing. If you look at any business report, any well-written business document, they might have a table in there. They might have a graph in there. It might have a pie chart in there. Make things visual rather than make them verbal. Make them visual if you can. That's going to make it a lot better, especially if you're writing about reports, statistics, things like that. Put it in a table so that way the person can look at the table and it becomes very visually appealing. And so the idea here is that you should be able to look at your document and go, well, that looks nice. It looks cool. It's not intimidating. It's got design elements. It's got headings and bullet lists and bold text, and I can scan it real easy. and it looks nice. It's visually appealing. I'm not afraid to read it. If they get your document and it's all one big paragraph of text, they're going to go, oy vey, I don't want to read this. You know why? Because that's how I am. If I get a document like that, I don't want to read it. I'd rather just skim it real quick. And if I can scan it with my eye and make it readable, I'm a very happy person in that setting. All right, so that's pretty much it for the business writing do's and don'ts. Again, you can use this for your you're welcome to use this for your assignment as your final list, and I will give you credit for that. Any questions on any of that, by the way? Does that make sense? I know I kind of went into quite a bit of detail. All right, what I'll show you now is I'm going to give you some samples of some documents just to give you an idea of kind of the do's and don'ts. And these are other students' work, so I didn't actually do these myself. I'm going to find what I'm looking for here for a second. So here we go. Let's go to I'm going to go to a different class because I have them all listed. I have them all done. So let me close this for a second. I'm going to go to my Business 24 class in modules. I have a folder. I probably should put one in your class. I have a folder with a bunch of documents in it. Here we go. So let me share my screen. All right, let me know if you can see this once it comes up. All right, can you guys see that? I can't hear any of you. So.
Yes, we see your narco college in class 925.
Okay, yeah, so it says bad, memo, all that. So let me just open a couple of these. Tell me if you can still see it when I do it.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I call this bad memo because what's wrong with it? It's all one paragraph of text. And it's not formatted properly like a memo, just to say, because memos don't have signature blocks on the bottom. They just have the initials of the author at the most. But this is all one paragraph, right? And so now I have to read it. I do like the fact that they put the word don't in all caps, but other than that, I mean, I have to read this thing, and right off the bat, my eye is going nowhere but to the word don't. And so this is I call that bad formatted for a memo, but more importantly, it's not using any of the rules of business writing that I've been talking about. So
you mean don't as in don't read?
Yeah, don't read me. Here's another one. I'm just going to go through a few of these. So here's another one. Again, this is supposed to be a memo. So one thing that is double spaced is the title block of a memo. So this should be double spaced up here. And then again, it's all just one paragraph. And again, there's the word don't again. So we have the same situation there. But they did make it 2 paragraphs. That's great, but they should have put a space between the 2 paragraphs for starters. That's just for starters. All right, here's bad memo 1. Another one. So that looks like the same one. Look at that. Let's see what this one is. I'm just going to run through them real quick here. I'm mostly looking for design elements, how it looks and how it reads. Mostly looking at right now how it looks. So here's a good one. This is actually a parking memo. I don't know if this is your assignment or not in this class, but the first memo might be a parking one. And this is the assignment. And it's come to my attention that employers are not properly following the parking guidelines, nor are they registering for a white parking sticker. As a reminder, day shift employees are to park in lots A and B. No day shift employees is allowed to park on the curb. Swing shift employees are allowed to park on the curb before 3:30. Then he goes back to swing shift. Then he goes back to day shift. Then he goes back to needing to be registered. And so it's just a hodgepodge of information all in one paragraph, right? And it's very difficult to read, and it's not organized, and everything is wrong with it. The only thing that's positive about this document is they did do their title block correctly, like a memo. Other than that, that's the only thing. So I'm going to show you this same one. I think I have one that is the right way that it should look, just to give you a stark contrast. So here's the same one, using design elements for readability. Notice I have all employees under one category. I have the day shift employees under another category, and swing shift employees under another category. And now it's very simple. This is a memo. It's probably going to go on a bulletin board in a break room. And if I'm a day shift employee, do I give a rip about what the swing shift employees' rules are? I'm just going to read what's relevant to me, right? Which is the day shift. Oh, I'm day shift. What do I need to know? I can park in parking lots A and B, and I cannot use the curb. And if I want, I can loan my parking space to somebody else. I'm done. Right? Oh, wait a minute. It says right here in all caps, please have your white sticker visible to avoid getting ticketed. Oh, goodness, I might get a ticket. What's that all about? I got to register my vehicle. Oh, when am I going to do that? Right here on May 12th and 13th. I didn't even read it yet. I'm just pulling out what I see right off the bat without even having to read it, right? So here I've used design elements for readability. It's properly formatted like a memo. I used headings. I used bullet lists. I used bold text. I use all caps. And the goal of this is it makes it super easy for me to read, right? So go back to the other one. Which would you rather have sent to you? This one or the other one, right? The other one makes it so simple and clear what you're trying to accomplish. So that's kind of the idea of design elements. And I'm saying don't just do it on a memo, do it on an email, do it in a letter, do it in other documents. So that way your document is easily scannable and readable. So that one doesn't want to open. Let's try this one. These are just bad memos. I probably would use this. So here's another one. This one's got a few positives about it, but it's all double spaced. So again, it makes it all day shift employees, swing shift employees. I don't know who this is relevant to because it's just a list of tandem, handicap, van pool car. I don't even know what it's talking about. Are all off limits to employees, all day shift employees. So again, now back to day shift, swing shift, day shift. Registration, at least they have some headings. That's helpful. Parking and registration, I don't know how helpful they are, but I do know that I must get registered. And then everything down here, I have dates and times. If they popped out to me, I would know something's going on those dates, but they kind of don't. So yeah, this one is, I call it bad because it's missing all those design elements that could make it so much more readable. And here's one that looks very much like an essay. They've indented every first line. They have a double spaced paragraphs of it. And even again, there's day shift, swing shift, day shift. Registrations. It's somewhat organized a little better, but even so, I don't really want to read it. I still like my other one better. These are all what it should not look like. So here's another one. I'm writing to inform everyone of the guidelines of management. We kindly ask day shift employees to park here. Day shift employees are welcome. So they did keep it day shift. That's good. At least the paragraphs grouped together with like information. Then swing shift. So they did that all in one section. And then they did ticketed. But are you aware that you'll get a ticket? It's not something like getting a ticket should really be made to stand out. Don't you think that people don't miss it? They might read this and go, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to get registered and to not get a ticket. Where was that at? Oh, it's right here. This sentence right here. You know, why not make that really stand out? At least they underlined the date and time. So I know something's going on those days. But point being is this one's a little better in the fact that it's got like information grouped together. But again, it's double spaced. And they didn't do much to improve the scannability or readability of it. But it's better than the other ones we've been looking at. And then here's one. This one's getting a little better. So we have day shift employees, swing shift employees, and then vehicle registration. But where's the one about being ticketed? Again, it's kind of lost in the second sentence of this first paragraph. So you might want to make that stand out. So that way, but I mean, this one's better than a few of the others. Why not make this a bullet list? So it'd be a lot easier to read than a list of things that you can or cannot do. And then here's a good one. This one I called good memo. So that one's better. All employees, day shift employees looks similar to the other one. But again, always displayed the white sticker to avoid ticketing. At least they made it stand out with bold underlined text. That helps. So there you go. That one looks pretty good. Memo good too. So this one's really well done. Parking guidelines, they highlighted important information. So that grabbed my attention right off the bat. Thank you for your attention. Vehicle registration policy. And then right here, look at warning. Any vehicle without a white sticker will be ticketed. That's beautiful. This one's actually probably the best one. Register, location, date, and time. So all employees must register. Day shift employees, here's your guidelines. Swing shift employees, there's your guidelines. That one's perfect. That's a A+. And because there is initials up here next to their name, by the way, when you're doing a memo, typically somebody else might be doing it, or because there is no signature, a lot of times they initial their name right here, saying that they definitely approve of it. Or if not, they usually type the initials at the bottom of the page. So either place is fine, but you should definitely have the initials of the actual author of the, and if you have a typist, you'd add both the initials of the author and the initials of the typist at the bottom. That's for any memo. So that one we already looked at. And then here's letters, looking at letters. So again, okay, so this one isn't really formatted like a letter. It's actually formatted like an email or a memo. And then how would you like to get that letter? At least there's a heading, but it's got long paragraphs. And you got a little bit of italics in there. Italics is nice, but they don't stand out as good as bold text. Like down here, this offer is available to May 20th. That does jump out. But yeah, that's a very, I mean, even though there's not short paragraphs, but there's spaces between the paragraphs, it helps a little bit, but it's still very intimidating. I wouldn't want to get that one. And then they rolled over into the next page and they made a signature block that looks like an email. So they basically made this formatted like an email, not a letter. A letter should have inside address, return address at the top. So we'll go look at a few of these real quick and then we'll wrap it up. It's going to open. So this is also supposed to be a letter. By the way, on all your documents, if it's a letter or a memo, you shouldn't include your assignment information on the letter. It should be a separate letter on its own page or a separate memo on its own page. So if you include this, you're kind of taking away from the document that it's supposed to be. But here again, we have all one paragraph with the short paragraph at the end. Our line spacing is inconsistent because they have two spaces here, but only one right here. Salutations always end in a colon, not a comma. So this is kind of weird. Doug Goodwin, Home Center. Dear Doug, I don't really get it. And then this is actually an appropriate letter signature block, but there should be no spaces between the name and the title, and there should be enough room for a signature because a letter usually involves an actual signature. But again, it's all one paragraph, and I call it a bad letter. Here's another letter. So I'm just giving you examples. Oy vey. Okay, this is again an email. It's supposed to be a letter, but it's all double spaced. But they do have a few bullet lists, so it helps a little bit. But they really spread it out. And as much as you might say, well, that really helps make it more readable, it doesn't. The double space is really hard on your eyes. You're like, where does the paragraph end and the next sentence begin? So chunks is better. Little chunks, your eyes can compactly read the chunk. And that's why single space paragraphs. This wouldn't be bad if it were all single space paragraphs as far as it looks. Here's a letter OK. So this one's getting better, right? So now it's actually formatted like a letter. There's a letterhead, date, and then inside address, and then a salutation, and then Home Depot's looking to hire a social media expert, and then here's some questions. So they have a list of questions and a bullet list. So this one's not bad. I would have just separated the bullet list from the two paragraphs above and below, and it would have been better, and maybe add a little bit more bold text to make important things stand out in those paragraphs. But other than that, this was probably a B+ to a low A as far as the way it looked. And then this one's also good. It's formatted with a return address. If you don't have letterhead, you should always have return address, date line, inside address, salutation. And then this one's good as well. The only difference is, again, it's all crunched together. You need to separate your paragraphs and your lists from one another, but at least it has headings and it has bullet lists, and it makes it a little easier to read. And if it wasn't all crammed together, it would be a lot easier to scan than it is, but it also rolled into 2 pages. Well, good letter 3, see if any of these get better. So that one's not bad as well. I would have just added some bold text in these paragraphs to make important things stand out, but at least it's formatted like a letter, except for it's actually formatted like an email at the bottom here. Letters only have name and title and sometimes company, but usually they don't include the phone number or the email address. Last one. That one's nice. They have a nice letterhead. They have bullet lists. They have headings. The only thing this one's lacking is maybe some bold text to make certain things point out, but it's very nicely organized. You can talk about, here are my questions. So they have questions on recruitment and selection, on job specific details. I know right here, the very first sentence says, I'd like to request assistance in learning about more about social media jobs, so they're looking for some help. And here's their questions on recruitment. Here's their questions on specific details of the job. So I got the gist of it in just reading the headings. So that's a really nice one. All right, so that's pretty much it. Do you guys get my point as to what I'm talking about? Does it make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
That's business writing compared to essay writing. And if you utilize those, I call them design elements or document design to improve readability, that really is what I'm looking for out of you with your writing assignments. So feel free to be liberal with them, as long as, you know, your whole document's not all bold. I mean, then we have a problem, but that you mix it up with some of these design elements to make key things stand out. So the idea is when I'm looking at your document, that it's formatted like the right kind of document, and that I can just run my eye right down it in 30 seconds, and I can get the gist of what it is, and I can read the sections that I think are most critical and important. If it's a meeting and you're explaining all the details, I might not care about the details, but if you put the date in bold or you separate it out, date and time of meeting, I know I have a meeting and I know what time and date, I can put it in my calendar and I can move on. The details don't matter to me, right? So that's the idea. All right, so I'm going to end the Zoom, or I'm going to end the